In this video, we'll install and configure Sophos Firewall as a virtual machine on Proxmox VE. I'll demonstrate as well a basic network setup with Sophos Firewall managing the network traffic. First thing we need to do is to go to sophos.com website to sign up for a free trial and download the firmware. Just type sophos.com on your web browser. In this main page, click Services and Products. Under Network, click Sophos Firewall. Click Free Trial. This trial is good for 30 days. We just need to fill out this form. I use my Gmail account in here. Agree to the terms and click Submit. The evaluation serial number will be sent over to the email address and in my case to my Gmail account. We'll check this out later. Since we are installing this on Proxmox, we can go ahead and download the KVM installer. The KVM installer is a zip file, so we need to extract this once this is done. Going to my Gmail account, we can find the provided evaluation serial number in here, which will be used for registration. In this email, we have instructions in setting up the firewall. One thing to take note here is that Sophos Firewall by default will utilize port 1 for LAN and port 2 for WAN, as I've highlighted the steps below. So make sure when configuring the network interfaces of this VM, port 1 should go to LAN and port 2 should go to WAN. Here is the extracted folder from the KVM installer zip file saved in my local computer. The folder contains two files, namely primary and auxiliary disks with a qcal2 file extension name. I attempted to upload the primary file in hoping it would be the same process that I normally do when uploading an ISO file, but unable to do so. The upload button is grayed out and there is an error saying wrong file extension. It appeared Proxmox supports uploading an ISO file extension and not a qcal2 file extension. To upload this qcal2 files, we'll go through some process here. Let us access CLI by clicking B-Link node and select shell. I'm issuing a df-kh command to display the mounted directories. I have a USB flash disk detected as /dev/sda1 and the mounted directory is /mnt/pve/iso_files. This is where all my ISO files are being uploaded into, and I wanted to use this also to store the qcal2 files but in a different directory. So I need to create a new directory under ISO files to where I can send the qcal2 files over. To get to the ISO_files directory, I'm issuing this change directory command cd/mnt/pve/iso_files. We can list all the contents of this directory by typing the ls command. Now I'll create a new directory with the command mkdir and name it qcal. I'll issue the ls command again to verify and qcal directory has indeed been created. How can we transfer this qcal2 files from my local Windows 11 machine to the newly created directory in Proxmox? We'll use SCP, which is included as part of Windows 11 installation. In File Explorer, type cmd in the address bar and press enter. This will redirect to the command prompt window in the same location where the files are. The first command is scp followed by asterisk, which is a wildcard meaning any files in the current directory. Proxmox user root at 192.168.8.250, the IP address of Proxmox, then followed by the full path /mnt/pve/iso_files/qcal. There is an authenticity warning, but we'll continue anyways by entering yes. I must have typed it incorrectly and it asks again. I entered yes correctly this time and will enter the root password of Proxmox. Looks like it's done transferring the files. Back to shell, cd into qcal directory and type ls command to verify the files. We have confirmation that the two files have been uploaded successfully into Proxmox. Now it's time to create this VM. I'll name this VM as Sophos FW. FW is short for firewall. Under OS, we're gonna select do not use any media since we'll not be using an ISO file for this installation. We'll leave the guest OS type and version as it is. Under system, we'll leave everything here as the default. Under disks, we'll just go to the next here since we are going to delete this anyway and replace it with the qcal2 disks files. Under CPU, I'll set this to 4 cores. For the type, I'll select host to make the CPU type same as the hardware CPU. Under memory, I'll set this to 8 gig. Under network, I'll leave it as it is, as we'll make some changes on this one later. Finish to confirm. Take note of this VM ID 106, and we'll use this later when importing the qcal2 disks. We'll go to the hardware section of this VM, select hard disk. We'll be removing this disk by clicking detach button. Are you sure you want to detach this disk? Select yes. So this is now an unused disk. Select it and click remove. Choose yes to confirm that we want to remove it completely. How can we add then the qcal2 disk files to this VM? Let us get back to shell and go to that directory where the qcal2 files are. We'll issue the df-kh command to remind us what directory we should go into. We'll cd into /mnt/pve/iso_files. Issue the ls to list all the directories or files. Remember that we place the qcal2 files into qcal directory. We'll cd into qcal and issue ls again. We are now in the correct directory where the two qcal2 files are located. We'll issue the command qm import disk, the VM ID 106, the primary disk file name. Just type PRI and use the tab key to auto-complete it. Local-LVM, which is the local storage. The command is complete. Just press enter to execute. Primary disk has been successfully imported. We'll do the same command for the auxiliary disk file. qm import disk, VM ID 106, the file name auxiliary disk. Just use tab key to autocomplete. Local-LVM. The auxiliary disk is also successfully imported. We'll jump back now to the VM hardware section. We now have two unused disks. We'll double click disk 0 first, select write back for cache, check discard and click add. We'll do the same for unused disk 1. Next step is setting up the network adapter. We have one network device here, net0, and it's linked to VMBR0. Is this enough to set up the Sophos Firewall? No, we need at least two interfaces, one for LAN and second for WAN. Allow me to illustrate of what I'm going to set up in here. This is my B-Link mini PC hardware running Proxmox with management IP 192.168.8.250. It has one physical Ethernet port named ENP1S0 by default, and it is physically cabled to a router with gateway 192.168.8.1. I have a physical PC running Windows 11 managing Proxmox on the same 192.168.8.x network. This ENP1S0 port is linked to VMBR0, which think of this as a virtual switch. You may watch my video about installing pfsense VM where I discuss this in details. Refer to the link in the description. In Sophos Firewall VM, the first interface net0 here will be the LAN side. This IP address 172.16.16.16 is the default auto-assigned once this firewall is up and running. This IP will be used for managing the firewall. Net0 is linked to VMBR1, which is another virtual switch. I have a Windows 11 VM in here. The Net0 of this VM will be linked to VMBR1. From this Windows 11 VM, we'll be managing Sophos Firewall on 172.16.16.16. For the second interface, net1, this will be used for the WAN side connection. Net1 will be linked to VMBR0. Net1 will obtain a DHCP IP address in the 192.168.8.x range provided by the router. Please note that this is just a simulated WAN, as this network 192.168.8.0/24 is still behind the LAN side of the router. Back in Sophos Firewall VM hardware settings, edit the first interface net0 and change this from VMBR0 to VMBR1. Let me show you where this VMBR1 is created at. Let us go to the B-Link node and under System, click Network. I already have VMBR1 in here, which I created back in my pfsense video. To create a virtual switch, click Create and select Linux Bridge. Then you can follow the VMBR naming scheme. I have a total of 3 virtual switches here, VMBR0, VMBR1, and VMBR2. VMBR0 is linked to the physical port ENP1S0 by default. Both VMBR0 and ENP1S0 are auto-created in Proxmox. VMBR1 has no association to the physical port. Same goes with VMBR2. Back in the Sophos Firewall VM hardware settings, we already configured the first interface net0 for the LAN connection. We'll be adding a second network device and link this to VMBR0 for the WAN connection. We now have 2 network interfaces. First, net0 is linked to VMBR1 for the LAN. Second, net1 is linked to VMBR0 for the WAN. Let us verify in the illustration here. Net1 is linked to VMBR0 for the WAN, and net0 is linked to VMBR1 for the LAN. Before we start this VM, we need to change the boot option. Edit the boot order, uncheck IDE2 and net0, and check the box next to SCSI 0, which is the primary disk, and click OK. I'm going to start this VM now via console by clicking Start Now button. Looks like it completed the first boot successfully, and we have a system detail in here and a password prompt. We'll now boot up Windows 11 VM so that we can access the web management of this firewall. Let us make sure net0 of this Windows 11 VM is linked to VMBR1. Let us start this VM then. Opening network and internet settings and clicking Ethernet, we can confirm that this VM has obtained an IP address via DHCP with IPv4 address of 172.16.16.17. Let us open Edge browser and access the firewall web management by typing https://172.16.16.16.16:4444. Where getting your connection isn't private because of self-signed certificate from the firewall. We'll click Advanced and Continue. Alright, we got the Welcome to Sophos Firewall page here. Check the box to accept the terms and click Start Setup. First to set up is creating a new admin password. I'll uncheck Install the latest firmware for now and click Continue. Create a storage master key. This is for added protection securing the stored account and password in the firewall. Check the box that you have stored the master key in a secured location. Click Continue. Next is to name the firewall and select the correct time zone. Next is to register the firewall. Enter in here the evaluation serial number that was provided to us from the email earlier. Next step is to claim the firewall, which requires a Sophos Central account. You can sign up for Sophos Central account for free trial as well. I already have one created. I'll click on Claim in Sophos Central. Enter the email address that you used to sign up for Sophos Central account. Enter the verification code. This verification code is set up when signing up for a Sophos Central account. Claim this firewall with 30 days extreme protection, web server protection, and email protection evaluation license. Once claiming is done in Sophos Central, we have this list of evaluation licenses or subscriptions activated for 30 days. This includes the base firewall or stateful firewall, VPN wireless, network protection for IPS and other stuff here, web protection, web security, application control, web malware protection, zero-day protection, central orchestration, email protection, web server protection. Looks like we have a lot of features we can play and test on this firewall. Next is to set up LAN. Port A is by default designated for LAN. Port A is the first network interface. In VM, this is net 0. We'll leave this gateway in route mode. I'll leave the IP addressing as it is with DHCP enabled. We can check these boxes to enable protection, but I'll leave it unchecked for now. Next is to set up an email address for sending notifications and backups. I don't want to set up configuration backup for now. Fill out an email address in here for sending notifications. We have reached the configuration summary and we'll just click Finish in here. It's applying the configuration and the firewall will restart. After the firewall has restarted, we are now prompted to log in. Username here will be admin. We are now in the main dashboard. We have a pop-up message saying we can use Sophos Central to manage the firewall. We'll select No for now. Let us go to Rules and Policies. This is where we can find the firewall rules. I'll click this default firewall rule to take a look what is configured in here. We can see the rule name in here and action is accept. Source zone is LAN. Source network is any. Destination zone is WAN, going to the internet. Destination network is any. There is an option to add web policy, apply web category traffic shaping, block quick protocol, scan HTTP and decrypt HTTPS, use zero-day protection, scan FTP for malware. There is also security features to add application control, traffic shaping and IPS, scan email content as well. There are so many types of protections and features we can enable inside this firewall. I'll cancel out of this and will not change any settings for now. Let's see if this Windows 11 VM, which is on the LAN zone, can get to the internet. I'll open a new tab in here and go to google.com. Surely this Windows 11 can get to the internet. To prove that it's the firewall rule that is allowing the traffic, I'll turn off this default firewall rule and let us test. Switch this button from on to off. The firewall rule that we just turned off is now grayed out. Let's see if we can still reach google.com. Trying to refresh the page here. Looks like it's not connecting now to google.com. I'll open a new tab and try again google.com. After some time, it says it can't reach the page. Turning on this default firewall rule will allow the web browsing back again. Now I'll add server 2022 into this network setup and place this in the DMZ. We'll add a virtual switch VMBR2. We need to add a third network adapter on this Sophos Firewall VM, which will be net2 and it will be connected to VMBR2. In server 2022 VM, net0 will connect to VMBR2. This will be our DMZ. Network address on this DMZ is 10.10.10.0/24. We'll assign an IP address of 10.10.10.1 on this net2 interface. There are two things that I wanted to achieve here. First, I wanted server 2022, which is in the DMZ zone, to be allowed to access the internet. Second, I wanted this Windows 11 VM to be allowed to access server 2022. Going now to server 2022 VM hardware settings. Ensure net0 is linked to VMBR2. In Sophos Firewall VM, we'll add another network device and link this to VMBR2 for the DMZ. Back to Windows 11 VM where we are managing Sophos Firewall Web Admin. Go to Network. Under Interfaces, we have Port A and Port B. Port A is for the LAN zone with the assigned IP 172.16.16.16. Port B is for the WAN zone with a DHCP acquired IP 192.168.8.113. It appeared adding a network adapter in the VM while the VM is still powered on does not reflect right away in the web admin. If we go to Sophos Firewall VM console, it still shows 2 for the total number of interfaces. After rebooting the VM, we have now a total number of 3 interfaces. We just need to refresh the browser here, log in back to the web admin. Go to network. We have now a third interface, port C, which is unbound. To configure this interface for DMZ, just click on port C. Select DMZ for the network zone. Assign a static IP of 10.10.10.1 with /24 subnet mask as planned. Save the configuration and update the interface. Port C is assigned now to the DMZ. The status is connected with IP address 10.10.10.1. Next, set up DHCP for the DMZ network. Go to DHCP. We have a default DHCP for the LAN port A. We'll add another DHCP server for the DMZ. I'll just name it as DMZ. Select interface port C. For the pool, I'll start at 10.10.10.100. and ending IP at 10.10.10.200. I'll leave use the interface IP as gateway checked, which is 10.10.10.1. I'll leave the DNS IP same as the gateway IP, then click save. This DHCP server for DMZ on port C with pool of IP addresses is enabled. Now let's start this server 2022 VM. Looks like it detected a network. I'll click yes here. The network icon at the bottom right says no internet access though. When examining the network connection details, it appears this VM obtained an IP address via DHCP of 10.10.10.100. Gateway is also correct, pointing to 10.10.10.1. Same with the DNS IP. When going to google.com, it does not load the page. What do you think is missing in here? Is it the firewall rule? Let us check the firewall rules then by going to Rules and Policies. We have a group in here and let us expand this. Under traffic to WAN, the firewall rule is grayed out or turned off. Under traffic to DMZ, it is also turned off. Same goes for traffic to internal zones. There are only two enabled firewall rules in here. The first one with the name Auto-Added Firewall Policy for MTA is for SMTP and SMTPS for email traffic. The second enabled firewall rule is for traffic from LAN zone to destination WAN zone and any service. Any service means any ports or protocols including HTTP, HTTPS, DNS, ICMP, etc. We can conclude there is no firewall rule matching a traffic from DMZ going to WAN. We'll go ahead and create a new firewall rule. I'll enter DMZ for the rule name. Action is accept by default. For rule position, I'll place this at the top. I don't want this to be under a rule group, select none. For source zone, select DMZ. Leave this to any for the source networks and devices. For destination zone, select WAN. For destination network, leave it as any. For services, leave this to any as well. Then click save. Here is the firewall rule that I named DMZ at the very top. This rule again is for traffic coming from source zone DMZ to destination zone WAN and any service. Let us go back to server 2022 and verify if it can reach google.com this time or not. Still can't access Google's page and it says DNS address could not be found. We can see there are some traffic usage on this DMZ firewall rule, which means it's matching this rule. I'll open command prompt here in server 2022 and try pinging google.com. It is not resolving to an IP address. It must be a DNS issue then. Going to administration and device access. For DMZ, DNS is unchecked. However, DNS is checked for LAN. Let us check this DNS box for the DMZ and click apply. Going back to server 2022 VM and re-entering google.com, the page is now reachable. And the command prompt google.com is pingable with a resolvable IP. We have achieved the first goal of allowing this server 2022 to reach the internet. Before we jump into the second goal, which is to allow Windows 11 VM in the LAN to reach server 2022 in the DMZ, let me update this network topology first. 172.16.16.17 from Windows 11 will be allowed to reach server on 10.10.10.100. We'll just test the connectivity via the ping command. In Windows 11 VM, let us now try to ping 10.10.10.100. It is timing out 100% loss. The firewall must have dropped the traffic since there is no rule for it. In rules and policies, we'll add a new rule in here. I'll name this LAN to DMZ. I'll put this rule at the top position. Rule group will be none for now. The default action is accept, which means allow or pass. For the source zone, we'll select LAN. For the source networks and devices, leave it as any. For the destination zone, select DMZ. I'll leave any for both destination networks and services. Then save. LAN to DMZ firewall rule is now configured. This rule means any network coming from LAN going to any network at the DMZ with any service will be allowed. Let's try to ping again, and still getting timed out. Let us examine device access. If ping is allowed, go to Administration and click Device Access tab. For LAN, ping is checked. For DMZ, it is not. We'll check this box then to allow ping. Then apply and OK. Let's do the ping test again. The ping is still getting timed out. I suspect that server 2022 is not allowing ICMP. Let's try to ping it from the firewall itself. Go to Diagnostics, under Tools, go to the ping section in here, enter the server 2022 IP 10.10.10.100, select interface port C, and click ping. It is not reachable as well, 100% packet loss. We can say it must be the server itself not accepting ICMP. We'll go to server 2022 and add a rule that will allow ICMP inbound. Open Server Manager under Tools and look for Windows Defender Firewall with Advanced Security. We'll be creating a new rule under Inbound Rules. We'll select Custom Rule, select all programs. For protocol type, select ICMP v4. Leave the local and remote IP addresses to any. Ensure to select Allow the connection. I'll leave it as it is. Naming this rule Allow ICMP and click Finish. Going back now to Windows 11 VM and verify whether ping can reach the server or not. This time it is reachable. So we have achieved our second goal that Windows 11 VM can reach server 2022. Thanks for staying with me if you have reached this far of this video. If this is helpful in any way, kindly consider subscribing. In the next video, I'll probably virtualize another firewall, or if not, install GNS3 VM. Until then, take care and see you on the next video.